Day had broken, exceedingly cold and gray, when the man turned aside from the main Yukon Trail and took a little-traveled trail that led eastward. His watch read 9 o'clock. There was no hint of sun, nor a cloud in the sky, yet a subtle gloom made the day dark. The man wasn't worried. He knew it would be a few more days till that cheerful orb would peep above the skyline and immediately dip from view. The Yukon lay a mile wide under 3 feet of ice and many more feet of snow, pure white as far as the eye could see, save for the dark hairline of the trail. But all this, even the tremendous cold, made no impression on him. 80-odd degrees of frost impressed him as cold and uncomfortable, and that was all. As he turned to go on, he spat. The sharp, explosive crackle startled him. He knew that at 50 below, spittle crackled on the snow, but this spittle crackled in the air. Undoubtedly it was colder than 50 below. But no matter. He was bound for the old claim on Henderson Creek, where the boys were already. He would be in camp by 6 o'clock, a bit after dark, but a fire would be going and a hot supper ready. As for lunch, he smiled agreeably at the bundle under his jacket, biscuits sopped in bacon grease and wrapped in a handkerchief. At his heels trotted a big native husky, without any visible or temperamental difference from his cousin, the wild wolf. The brute instinctively experienced a vague, menacing apprehension. The man knew it was 10 miles to the Forks. He was making 4 miles an hour, and he calculated he would arrive at the Forks by 12:30. He'd celebrate that event by eating lunch there. The man held steadily on, thinking of nothing save lunch at the Forks and camp with the boys by 6. His nose and cheeks were numb, but it didn't matter much. What were frosted cheeks? A bit painful, that was all. Coming around a bend, he shied abruptly and retreated several paces. The creek was frozen clear to the bottom, but there were springs that bubbled up under the snow that the coldest snaps never froze. They were traps, hiding pools of water under the snow, 3 inches, even 3 feet deep. He had felt the give under his feet and heard the crackle of a hidden ice skin. Wet feet meant danger, at least delay, for he'd be forced to build a fire and dry his socks and moccasins. As he swung along at his 4-mile gait, he came upon several similar traps. At 12:30, he arrived at the Forks. If he kept it up, he'd certainly be with the boys by 6. He unbuttoned his jacket and drew forth his lunch. In no more than a quarter of a minute, numbness laid hold his fingers. He struck them a dozen sharp smashes against his leg and sat on a snow-covered log to eat. He tried to take a mouthful, but the ice muzzle formed from his frost-encrusted beard prevented it. He proceeded to make a fire from the supply of seasoned twigs lodged in the undergrowth and thawed his face enough to eat his biscuits. For the moment, the cold was outwitted. The dog took satisfaction in the fire, stretching out close enough for warmth. The man took his comfortable time over a smoke. He then pulled on his mittens, settled his ear flaps firmly, and took the creek trail up the left fork. The dog was disappointed and yearned back toward the fire. He knew it was not good to walk abroad in such fearful cold. It was time to lie snug in a hole in the snow. For half an hour the man saw no signs of springs, but at a place where the soft snow seemed to advertise solidity beneath, he broke through and wetted himself halfway to the knees. He cursed his luck. He had hoped to be in camp with the boys by 6 o'clock, and this would delay him for an hour, for he would have to build a fire and dry out his footwear. On the bank he found a high-water deposit of dry firewood. He touched a match to a small shred of birch bark from his pocket and fed the young flame with wisps of grass and small twigs. At 75 below zero with wet feet, a man must not fail on his first attempt to build a fire. All sensation had gone out of his feet. To build the fire, he had to remove his mittens, and the fingers had gone quickly numb. The fire was a success. He was safe. But before he could cut the strings of his moccasins, it happened. He should not have built the fire under a spruce tree. Each bough was fully freighted with snow, and each time he pulled a twig, he created agitation sufficient to bring about disaster. Without warning, an avalanche descended and blotted out the fire. The man was shocked, as though he had just heard his own sentence of death. He would have to build the fire again, and this time there must be no failure. He brought out his matches, but the cold had driven the light from his fingers, and the matches fell in the snow. He caught the whole bunch between his hand heels and scraped them against his leg. Finally, they flared into flame, 70 matches at once. He held the flame to the birch bark, but it wouldn't light, because his burning hands were in the way. He could smell it. He jerked his hands away, and the matches fell into the sizzling snow, hopelessly scattered. Each puff of smoke went out. He had failed. The sight of the dog put a wild idea into his head. He would kill the dog and bury his hands in the warm body until the numbness went out of them. He sat in the snow and encircled the dog's body with his arms. He realized he couldn't kill the dog. With helpless hands, he couldn't hold his knife, nor throttle the animal. He released it, and the dog plunged wildly away. A fear of death came to him. It was no longer a matter of freezing his fingers and toes, or of losing his hands and feet. It was a matter of life and death, and the chances were against him. He ran up the creek bed blindly in a fear he had never known. Maybe if he ran far enough, his feet would thaw out, and he would reach camp and the boys. At the same time, another thought said that it was too many miles away, that he would soon be stiff and dead. Several times he stumbled, and finally crumpled and fell. He tried to rise, and failed. He must sit and rest, he decided, and next time he would merely walk and keep on going. He was feeling warm and comfortable. It came to him that the frozen portions of his body must be extending. He tried to think of something else. He was aware of the panicky feeling that it caused, and he was afraid of the panic. But the thought persisted and produced a vision of his body totally frozen. He made another wild run along the trail, the dog at his heels. When he fell a second time, the dog sat facing him, curiously eager and intent. The warmth and security of the animal angered him. He was losing his battle with the frost. It was creeping into his body from all sides. The thought drove him on, but he ran no more than 100 feet when he staggered and pitched headlong. It was his last panic. With a newfound peace of mind came the first glimmerings of drowsiness. A good idea, he thought, to sleep off to death. The dog sat facing him, waiting. The brief day drew to a close. The dog crept close to the man and caught the scent of death. Then it turned and trotted up the trail in the direction of camp, where it knew there were other food providers and fire providers.